Racial disparities threaten regional success, but hope is seen in stories of lives reclaimed, reaffirming self-esteem and self-help. Next on Close the Gap.
Close the Gap, Race Disparities is a co-production of the Itasca Project and TPT's Minnesota channel. Funding for this program has been provided by the McKnight Foundation, with additional funding by Best Buy Children's Foundation, the Minneapolis Foundation, and Greater Twin Cities United Way.
The Itasca Project is a CEO-led civic endeavor that exposed the stark disparities threatening the Twin Cities' future. These are the stories of Minnesotans who put a face on these problems, and some of the efforts to close the gap.
Race disparities cut across basically every socioeconomic indicator you can think of, and for every race.
The Itasca Project is a business-based initiative that wanted to ensure the region's competitiveness in the decades to come. Their work meant understanding the disparities that stand in the way of a viable future for the Twin Cities. They commissioned the Brookings Institution for a landmark study, which revealed the most notable issue was racial disparities.
It's a startling story, I think, for a lot of people, because we do hear so much good news all the time about Minnesota that we haven't necessarily had the impetus to really dig in and understand, what's the picture underneath. Compared to the average white Twin Cities resident, the average black Twin Cities resident earns about half. The average Latino Twin Cities resident is 5 times more likely to be a teen mother. And the average Native American Twin Cities resident is 5.5 times more likely to receive inadequate prenatal care.
So for Native Americans in the Twin Cities, the inequities begin before a child is born, and further back still.
For Indian people, the loss of land, the loss of culture, the loss of language had a huge impact. We can't ignore the historical context of where we are today, because a lot of the issues that we're dealing with are multi-generational.
The Twin Cities is home to one of the largest urban Indian populations in the U.S. Many reside in the Phillips neighborhood in South Minneapolis, which is one of the poorest communities in the region.
The multiple hardships that these women endure are astonishing.
The Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center, also in the Phillips neighborhood, is an enterprising and authentic solution. Home to a wide variety of services for Native American women and families.
Family Stabilization Services. It's a holistic group of services that really address a lot of the problems that our families come into us with. We also have a program called the Healing Journey, which is a really unique harm reduction program that meets the needs of late-stage chronic alcoholic women.
We get at least one call every day, and the waiting list is enormous.
The emergency shelter is a 3-bedroom unit, and it's really a temporary stop while we work with them to get them into some other kind of appropriate shelter. We have Section 8 units with supportive services, and that is really a stepping stone for women who need to get their feet under them, they need to stabilize so that they can then move on and become more self-sufficient and sort of rebuild their own lives.
Okay, well, thank you. Once the crisis is over, there's still like barriers that, they need to, get through, and so I'm here. My mom, we had a really rough life, and she would come here to get services, so she really loves it here, and she loves that I'm working here. Our vision is really as Indian women helping other Indian women.
The staff here amazes me every day. They work with some very difficult issues every day. The Department of Corrections is estimating how many prison beds they need to build based on 3rd grade reading scores. So if you have a kid who's entering kindergarten not prepared to learn, by the time that child reaches 3rd grade, if they're not reading very well, they've just become a potential prison bed. We look at the numbers of dollars that we invest in the correction system in this state. So what can we do to save money in the long run? Well, we can invest in our children. When they go to quality early learning centers, the results are impressive.
The MIWRC features a well-regarded child care center called Cherish the Children.
A lot of our families too are like single parents but are working, and they're struggling and trying to make it, and we really enjoy helping them.
It helps me because I know I lived here, and I know the women that watch my daughter, so I feel comfortable when I go to work.
Karen came from some very difficult circumstances, and she was quite alone, and came to our emergency apartment, and she was very ready to change her life.
Karen has a great job at Cywick Lumber in Minneapolis, a company that gave her a chance to build a career on the foundation of a better life laid at the Indian Women's Resource Center.
Through MIWRC, the staff and the people, it's really a big blessing. They inform me on breastfeeding, prenatal care, and the effects alcohol can have on my baby. I took advantage of the AA meetings and aftercare that was offered. Just to be in my shoes, coming from where I came from, and to see where my daughter is now, it's like it's a good miracle.
A symbol of the organization's success is the name Karen gave to her daughter.
I named her after Lisa, and she's the one who came to pick us up, and I feel that's MIWRC saved me and my daughter when I was pregnant, so that's her namesake.
Lisa has another name full of meaning. Her Ojibwe name is Wewe Tedene Ikwe, which means Northern Lights Lady. Her smile and personality are as bright as the Northern Lights, except maybe when she's just up from a nap. Lisa's learning her native language at the center through an Ojibwe immersion project.
There's this one time my daughter was in her classroom down there, and they were outside playing, and she said, she pointed at a squirrel, and she said, "There's an ajidamu." In Ojibwe, ajidamu means squirrel. So then she taught the class that day what the meaning of a word was. So she too has helped me in my learning our language too.
We know the cognitive benefits of learning a second language at an early age. So for these children, they're learning a second language at an early age, but they're also getting connected with their culture, which builds their pride, which builds their resilience. These children are either going to grow up to be strong, to be contributing members of society, to be employed somewhere, to own homes, to have healthy families of their own, or they're not. We know that Indian kids do much better in school and in their social lives if they feel pride in who they are, if they have that solid background. So it's very important that the cultural piece is there for our children.
Racial disparities are one of America's oldest problems. As the Itasca Project has looked around the nation for answers, they have been reminded that Minnesota is often seen as home to new solutions.
In general, anytime you're looking for best practices on policy issues, on social endeavors, when you look around the country, the Twin Cities comes up all the time, right? On innovative thinking and innovative approaches to addressing issues.
This is a tool as a way to show policymakers what it looks like when we look at the color lines.
Among these innovative homegrown endeavors is the Organizational Apprenticeship Project. The OAP emphasizes training and leadership development to foster change.
Could you explain? Closing the gap between analysis and activism. That's what we're trying to do here, but put in race first.
The OAP's first project was a racial report card for the 2006 legislature. The document combined detailed analysis with a provocative grading system that got the attention of lawmakers.
You had legislators calling me and crying. They were extremely moved. We did the scorecard method, so you had positive points, you had negative points, you had no points. Those folks who had no points called and said, "Jermaine, let's talk." We're presenting opportunities to act, the opportunity to get the A, right?
One of the legislators who scored well was former Republican Representative Dan Dorman from Albert Lea, Minnesota.
Given his standing, given his district, which had a low amount of communities of color in his district, he stepped up. And that suggests to us that, that racial equity wasn't just a Twin City issue. You didn't have to have tons of people of color in your district to step up. That this is part of a larger value of Minnesotans, and that people from across the lines, from any party line, from any district in the state can move this stuff, can take leadership. Very encouraging. Our primary finding is that 8 of the 10 proposals had elements, whether intended or not, would exacerbate or maintain the racial disparities in education and health. It's well documented, the racial disparities in Minnesota. So we're trying to pack that gap in terms of analysis, race research. You have these values, and race is part of that. Racial justice is part of, overall justice, overall, opportunities for all. And that if we continue to have these contradictions, we will continue to not live up to our values. We'll continue to be divided.
Issues facing groups with different lengths of time in this country are clearly important and make a difference. They're very meaningful distinctions. You see poverty rate on the left, and then the share of the adult population without a high school degree for the white population versus sub-Saharan African and Hmong. The idea of a third of our Hmong population living in poverty, I think, is quite stunning.
The Itasca Project's findings include a curious syntax. There's a line drawn between Hmong and non-Hmong Asians. Unfortunately, there's often a wide gap between the two. The Hmong have some of the highest rates of poverty. The 2000 census noted that almost half of non-Hmong Asians have bachelor's degrees. At that time, only 8% of Hmong had college degrees. The Hmong experience in America is just part of a 1,000-year journey from China to Southeast Asia and now St. Paul. The story of this journey is told in traditional ways, like the familiar Hmong tapestry. For young Hmong Americans, life in this country presents new challenges, like racism and economic inequities. But these challenges are being met with new ways to tell stories.
30 years of war, persecuted and scorned behind enemy lines. A small child is born. What will he live for? Fighting for the rest of his life. Gunshot.
I'm very proud of being Hmong, and I'm proud of my history and what we've been through and what we've survived through to be here. And that's what motivates me to want to be successful and also to help the next generation. I was born in Thailand in Nong Khai refugee camp.
From a Thai refugee camp to St. Paul's Frogtown community, Tu Psycho Lee had a tough childhood.
For me, as a Hmong person, I felt like we were bullied a lot, and that we felt we needed to come together and defend ourselves. I got into some trouble when I was around 16. I wasn't the best student, I wasn't the best athlete, so I felt like I didn't really have anything going for me in my life, so I felt there was some self-hatred and a lack of self-worth. So I felt that's what really drew me into finding some worth within getting in trouble, getting involved with gangs and whatnot. And I got locked up in a juvenile institution, but then that's when I started writing poetry because I had nothing to do, so all I could do was write. I think once I found poetry and spoken word and hip-hop, that's what gave me something to go for in life, a pathway. And then eventually my brother caught on and he started doing it too, so that's when we formed the group Delicious Venom. So we started these open mics, and we want to hear your struggles from an African American perspective or from a Latino perspective or from a Native American perspective. And so we kind of bond with our struggles, and also we educate each other through our music and through our poetry, because that's when we first heard about raising awareness about the genocide of Hmong people.
Public enemy influenced MCs to have a choice, so never ever quit, because they don't want us to have a voice.
We're gonna incorporate storytelling and chokang together. CHAT stands for the Center for Hmong Arts and Talent, and the mission is to nurture and develop Hmong artists to enhance the community. For me, it all breaks down to the poetry of the lyrics. And I work with the after-school arts programs here, so we have hip-hop, dance, story, storytelling, drawing, and I also do residencies. I go into schools and teach about spoken word and hip hop. Gotta ride some devastation, gotta ride some devastation. Okay, give yourselves a hand. All right. I think I'm very fortunate to work here at Chat, and I'm very fortunate that Chat exists. It's always a struggle to do what I do, but it's something I'm passionate about.
The arts are a proven way to keep youth engaged and interested in school. And with just over half of young adults holding a high school diploma, creative expression can be a key to continuing education.
We're bringing back danheng, like stories that our parents told, and also we're trying to tell our stories as a newer generation.
Now I want you to listen, cause our people have risen, starving for any meal. They kept it concealed.
We have disparities by race on virtually every socioeconomic indicator you want to look at. And really understanding the issues requires having a nuanced understanding of race disparities.
From a dynamic doll collection to the work of her late great-uncle, author, photographer, and filmmaker Gordon Parks, St. Paul media leader Robin Hickman surrounds herself with inspiring visions.
Uncle Gordon not only influenced what I do for a living, but how I do it.
She also shares these things with Twin Cities youth who she feels lack the inspiration she had as a child, raised by a village brimming with activism, art, even a regular presence on public television.
The communal process is still at work.
I look at growing up and experiencing firsthand progress. But now I am seeing changes in our young people, and there seems to be less services, less opportunities, less visions of possibilities for them.
The visions today's media-saturated society force on young people, like the endless stream of music videos, are part of the problem.
I'm seeing things that just hurt my spirit. I'm seeing young women who every other night might be sneaking to a strip club to dance because they want to be like the video girls.
For African-American girls, issues of self-esteem and standards of beauty complicate the already daunting list of disparities they face.
On that corner out there, at Selby and Milton, stop and say, "Sister girl," because I know she's hooking and she's 14 years old. And that's why a lot of my work now has to do with the heart of the matter: esteem, identity, definition of beauty, standards of beauty that have been imposed on our young people and our young women. I was approached by Sharon Flake, the author of the book, The Skin I'm In, to be a part of a team that would create a film adaptation of this book. I had already been working with young women on issues of self-esteem and the classic historic color conflict around hair and complexion. And I went to the group of girls and I asked them if they knew about the book, and all of them had read it. And so that was kind of the birth of the Love in the Skin I'm In movement. The movement has engaged young women and young men throughout the Twin Cities, and just going into classrooms with them and stepping back and seeing them conduct workshops with young people of other cultural backgrounds.
But this isn't just an issue of teen angst and adolescence. Robin says you'll find it in corporate boardrooms as well as classrooms, downtown skyways as well as school hallways.
And even with older women, some of that internalized oppression plays out. I mean, sisters that I've seen that are just polished and sharp. But once we begin to engage and engage in truth-telling around this issue, that some of us older women have not had the courage to talk about. The young filmmaker Carrie Davis produced and directed the film A Girl Like Me, which addresses self-esteem, standards of beauty, and also lifts up a classic test that was done by Dr. Kenneth Clark with children asked to identify their preference in dolls.
Can you show me the doll that looks bad? Okay. And why does that look bad?
Because it's black.
And can you give me the doll that looks like you?
From a YouTube hit to an appearance on Oprah, Carrie Davis had touched millions with her film. Robin reached out to the New York teen, and the two quickly bonded. In the midst of her rise to viral video fame, Robin brought Carrie to the Twin Cities.
Put your hands together, show some love for Carrie and David. You can tell people all you want how like certain standards are going to affect self-esteem and self-image, but when you figure out a way to show people, that's when they're really going to get it.
He like laid in the tub, like poured like capfuls of bleach into it just so they could like see if their skin would get lighter.
I'd be like, oh, I wish I was just like this Barbie doll. You show me the doll that you like best or that you'd like to play with?
I like that one.
And why is that the nice doll?
He's white.
And so if that young man is then in a position later in life to hire or embrace someone who looks like them, might not do it because he hasn't internalized that oppression.
I think it was inspirational, and it don't even matter about how you dress, how you look. You're here to like get your education. You're here to in this world just to help other people. Just do things you think you can do. Don't just try to impress anybody.
A girl like me presents our pain and our wounds. The skin I'm in will bring healing and hope.
Robin Hickman says that sometimes helping young people doesn't have to be that complicated. For years, she's collected and designed dolls, which she uses in her interactions with youth.
My young girls at the YWCA, they often talk about, well, Miss Robin, if girls could see your dolls, they would learn to love dolls that look like them. So if it's through dolls or it's through media, for me, it's about how do we touch souls? We just have to be about doing it, period.
Race disparities are particularly profound for a number of our recent immigrant groups. Our rates of immigration have increased dramatically. Immigration clearly plays a large role in racial disparities and understanding racial disparities.
Census data says that the metro area added more than 250,000 minority residents since 1990, a trend that likely will continue and could continue to drag socioeconomic indicators downward. But these new Minnesotans will be aided by an old organization, Neighborhood House, located on St. Paul's west side. From its founding by Jewish immigrants in 1906 to the opening of the organization's new home, the Paul and Sheila Wellstone Center a century later, the agency has served as Minnesota's Ellis Island. The new Neighborhood House is adorned with murals that tell the story of caring and community and of the many cultures that have made Minnesota home.
That first generation that were, and they didn't have to make an excuse for it, but they were the ones about being here real humbly, thankful, and those kinds of values. And so my generation became the loudmouths, man. We became the agitators.
Agitator, activist, Vietnam veteran, and now elder. For decades, Gilbert has been a steady and friendly leader on the west side.
4 generations of my family have used Neighborhood House services over the years. I've been an employee of Neighborhood House for almost 30 years, but I've been with Neighborhood House since I was age 5.
The 60s brought brown power to the Twin Cities Mexican-American community. By the 70s, college classes and Chicano pride helped Gilbert evolve from a young street fighter to a youth worker at Neighborhood House, where he has focused on reaching out to youth on the margins, youth who were just like him.
But for whatever the reason is, the economy, racism, folks need that little boost. And if we can be that little boost to them, again, that's what Neighborhood House has been all about. I'm really looking forward to this one being put up, because in this one is going to be an image of the Harry Gaston, that mentor, that early mentor to many of us. Harry was that forerunner of the words mentoring, big brothers, counseling, and all those kinds of adjectives. People rise to the level of expectation. Harry taught us to make sure we believed in everybody. Everyone should have a chance, And some of us are going to need 2 or 3 chances, but you still give them that chance.
An African-American coach touched the life of a young Chicano. Years later, that leader reached out to St. Paul's newest arrivals.
I had the pleasure to work, meet folks in the Hmong community when they became our neighbors back in the late 70s. One of the things that I realized is that the adult folks had the same kind of energy, the same kind of values that my grandparents had when they first came here.
One of the Hmong youth who Gilbert worked with is Tu Zhi Zhang, who's become a sought-after storyteller, speaker, and trainer, passing on the power of mentorship that he has inherited. With the new millennium, there's a new wave of immigrants coming to the Twin Cities. Like a century before, Neighborhood House remains a resourceful beacon where an array of services like English language learner classes help diverse communities begin their American journey.
That's right.
We need them to be really successful. So they're paying that higher tax that's going to be going into Social Security, and whatever it is. So it behooves us right now to make sure that everyone gets educated to their fullest extent. You look at a lot of the work that's being done around the cities. We call it the Browning of Minnesota, man, because you look at who's working on the roofs, who's working in the lawn industry, who's building, all kinds of stuff like that. You see us there. Siete, oh, muy bien, hola. All of a sudden now there's signs out there that say habla español. So it's like, wow, they know we're here now. Even though we've been here since 1886, now they really know we're here. The doors were already open to be entrepreneurs, open businesses, become translators. All that stuff just didn't happen. It happened on the shoulders of the Chicano movement, the Mexican-American people that did all that. So that history hasn't been told.
After decades of service and touching countless lives, Gilbert de la O retired, just months after his friend Harry Gaston passed away. The year also saw the finishing touches put on the Paul and Sheila Wellstone Center as artist David Craig added the final image to the meaningful mosaic, bringing Harry Gaston back to Neighborhood House.
I think all this stuff is great. It talks about culture. It talks about friendship, embracing, acceptance, and I think the more, if we can do that more, man, we'd be a great, it is a good place to live already, but it'd even be a greater place,
To learn more about disparities in our area, visit Twin Cities Compass, a Wilder research resource at tccompass.org. Close the Gap, Race Disparities is a co-production of the Itasca Project and TPT's Minnesota channel. Funding for this program has been provided by the McKnight Foundation, with additional funding by Best Buy Children's Foundation, the Minneapolis Foundation, and Greater Twin Cities United Way.